we're talking about public speaking here, but it's not actually about public speaking. It's actually about confidence, the confidence to speak anywhere, anytime, any place. Because the reality is, if you can learn how to speak with confidence in front of 100 people, that interview you've got coming up, that networking event, that party you've got coming up will seem a lot less daunting because you already know you have the inner ability to speak to a crowd, so you can speak to anyone at any time and any place.
Whoop, 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 whoop. You opened one of the many recorded conversations that are ready for you to help you out getting your awesome idea, your product or service out in a more clear, authentic, or entertaining way. Make sure you're ready to take some notes because this is going to be interesting. Let's go.
So my name's Kyle Murtagh. I'm a public speaking coach, presentation skills expert, whatever adjective you want to use. Basically, I help people stand up and speak with more confidence. That's essentially what I'm doing. I'm based in Glasgow, Scotland. And one of the reasons I'm really passionate about public speaking is because I used to hate public speaking. I used to avoid it like the plague. But when I actually started to, get to know it a little bit more, I realized it wasn't as scary a beast as people make out. And it can actually help you so much in all aspects of your life in terms of communication.
Wow. Wow. You're already presenting right now using your arms, being in front of the audience. Really awesome. And I read online that you also felt in the beginning quite like you describe yourself as an introvert, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would
How
say I
did you?
still
Yeah.
am. I would say I still am. I'm not someone who likes to spend a tremendous amount of time around people. I really enjoy being by myself, alone. I like staying in, watching a film. I enjoy the quiet. So it's something which is still there for me. But at the same time, I feel human beings were a lot more complex than being either introvert or extrovert. You can be many different things. It depends how you feel. It also depends what you want to do in your life and what your goals are. And my goals are more of the extroverted kind. So it encourages me to kind of step out of my introverted cave and come out and play with the world a little bit more. But anyone, the key point here is regardless of how you feel, if you think you're a shy person, an extremely extroverted person, you can become a good communicator. These are just skills that you learn.
Really interesting. I really like that you phrase it as a skill, because also when I have conversations with people about public speaking, the thoughts they have is that they have to stand on a stage and talk
Yeah.
in front of like in like a whole football stadium and everybody's listening to them. But actually this is also already a presentation. Now you're presenting yourself, you're presenting your thoughts. And I'm
Yeah.
very curious because I'm sure that a lot of listeners to this will also feel that, it's quite a step to feel comfortable and confident in front of an audience or in front of people, talking about your idea, being your authentic self.
Mhm.
And you, as you're describing yourself in a cage as an introvert. How did you fell into this topic of public speaking and helping others with it? I'm super curious about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was studying psychology at a university here in Scotland. And after about 4 years, I realized I didn't want to be a psychologist. That was my big epiphany. So then, of course, the question is, what are you going to do with your life? That's what everybody asks you. So I decided just to try a bunch of different things, Laurie, to try and figure out what I'm going to do in my life. And one of those things was public speaking. I went along to a place where people practice public speaking. Maybe people know Toastmasters. It wasn't that, but it was similar to it. And so I went along there and did my first ever presentation, and it was pretty disastrous. I literally stood up, said 2 words, and sat right back down. But when I sat back down, and I kind of felt the fear almost pulsating through my body, it can be really debilitating. I thought to myself, wow, I never want to feel like this again. And the reality is, no matter what you do in life, whether you start a business, you take a career in corporate, or even in your personal life, if you want to get married, for example, public speaking will find you. You're just going to have to face it at some point. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to try and get better at this. So I kept going back to that meeting, that club where we're practicing their skills. I started reading books about it, started watching great speakers online, people like Les Brown, for example. And I really just immersed myself in the topic. And after 6 months, I started to feel a lot more confident, started to lose that fear. And I noticed that every aspect of my communication was becoming better, even outside of public speaking. And then at that point, a very kind lady offered me an opportunity to speak to 600 students at a university locally here. And very scary, very daunting at the time, but I took the opportunity and it went really well. And that sort of sowed the seed for me that I want to become a trainer. I want to help other people feel comfortable in their speaking, get past their fear, and feel more confident ultimately. So that's when I decided to launch my business, Confidence by Design, which will turn 4 in July. So that's how I got into the field.
Wow, crazy story. Crazy story. And what fascinates me, and that sometimes it's called like your mess becomes your message, right? Like if you struggle with it, something so bad and
Yeah.
you're thinking like this is not how, like this should, that I should improve. Basically I should improve this because this is not cool. This is not cool. It will, distract me from my goals. And when you face it and you go through it and you learn from it, and not by reading only books but actually practicing it and find out
Yeah.
what works and adjust what doesn't and improve, 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 and iterate, then you can actually, help others because you know how it's been before. So that's actually super,
Oh,
super cool to hear. And my personal
yeah.
story is quite similar, actually. It's quite funny. Like when I was young and I had to present in school, I was I was terrified. I once did a presentation because in our school system you had to do presentations every year, and it would be the part where I already started sweating like a week before, like that kind of
Right.
stuff. And then one time I really remember this vividly. I had this presentation and I wrote my notes on a notebook and I was presenting like this. So I
Okay.
could I could read my notes here, and then people
Yeah,
who
it just,
didn't
the boot
didn't have
kept
to
going
see
up.
me. Yeah. Yeah. And it's indeed very interesting how
Yeah,
when you
it's so
you on
true
some
what you
point.
said. I love that phrase. Your mess becomes your message. It's really where we connect, right? As human beings, with things that went wrong. People say the best stories you can tell are your firsts, your failures, your frustrations, or your There's another F to it as well. Fears. Yeah, your fears. So that's really what makes a compelling story, but also what endears you to your audience as well.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree. Very fascinating how, like also for the people that listening and thinking like, ah, but this sounds also cool. These people are talking like visibly quite comfortable and confident. That's what I want too. But that's because of practice. Because you on
Yeah.
some point, and you said that perfectly, you step out and do it while you feel uncomfortable, and because you practice, you gain the confidence. It's not that you wait for confidence to,
No.
magically appear and then you're there on stage and talking all what you want. No, it's about being uncomfortable in the moment and start building confidence because of practice. So really,
So
really
true.
cool. Really
So
cool.
true. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I see behind you, Cal, I see a very cool banner, I think, about like the book you wrote, no, like the 5 pillars of effective public speaking.
Yeah,
I
some
was very,
subtle advertisement.
yeah. No, really cool. And I'm very curious because you probably thought a lot about this title, and there's the word effective. Very curious,
Yeah.
like what is like effective public speaking for you? What do you mean with that word?
Well, I think a successful and effective presentation is when people act on your words. If you think about it, when we speak, we do it because we want people to do something afterwards. Now, depending on what your presentation topic is, that can be many different things, but we want to create some momentum, some action, movement of some kind when we speak. So that's why I chose the word effective there. And just going back to the book, basically it's outlining the 5 skills that all great speakers have, which really allows them to deliver powerful messages and get people to act on their words. So it started off as a workshop for me and then sort of evolved into a book over time.
Cool. Cool. And probably people can, read the book, find out what those 5 pillars are. I'm very curious also.
Yeah,
Do you want to, maybe tell the first two?
yeah. Yeah, I'll tell them all five. I've got no problem with that. So, number one is body language. Your non-verbal communication is very paramount, right? We all know that's how we get a lot of information when we look at speakers, when we look at each other. Second is voice. We don't want to be monotone. We want to make sure we're keeping our voice engaging and compelling all the way through. Third, something really overlooked is structure. How you actually put a presentation together so that it's unified and it symbolizes one key message that you're putting to the audience. Fourth is clarity. If you confuse them, you'll lose them. And then fifth is impact. How you make a lasting impression that inspires action. So that's the five key pillars. And of course, a lot more depth the book goes into, otherwise it'd be a very short read. And so that's something you can check out if you want to. It's on Amazon, on paperback, but also audiobook. And audiobook's really important for me, Laurie. I don't know how you take in your books, but I'm dyslexic, so I like to listen. I find that really helpful as well. So it's on there if people want to check it out.
Yeah, cool. And it's indeed great because also with reading a book, but also with presentations, I found it very fascinating that not everybody absorbs the same information in the same way. Like some
Yes.
people are more auditorian, like they
Yeah.
want the structure and the facts, and they don't want these so-called sometimes bullshit stories. They just want to know what am I gonna gain from this information you're telling me. And other people like me, I'm very visual. I like when you engage with me, like when you talk and you're like this and you're entertaining. That's how you catch me. But that's the interesting part, like not everybody works it the same way, and that's
Yeah.
also with the presentation, also with the book. So very cool you thought about that.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah, and
make
then
it
another
work.
thing is kinesthetic learning as well,
Exactly.
right? Some
Yeah.
people like to actually physically do. That's how they learn. So you've got to take into account all of these different types of learners in your presentation, which can be really hard. Can be really hard, but we have to strive to appeal to all, don't we?
We do. It's a bit sad if like only because this is like 1/3 of the audience is like every 1/3 is
Yeah.
like represented. Then like you have the
Yeah.
visuals and that's like 1/3 clapping for you and the rest is on their phone. So
Yeah.
it's cool to engage with them all. I'm
Yeah, you
curious.
can't just say only visual learners, only visual learners. It doesn't quite work like that.
That would be a cool audience, all like screaming and clapping all the time. No, cool, interesting, and indeed, like it is hard. It is hard. Like, can we be honest about this? Like, I make mistakes. You probably make mistakes. For
Yeah.
all human beings.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. Like, is there one thing you did before? I don't like to call it a mistake, but like a learning point that you really gained for yourself because of practice that you want to share with people listening or looking at this interview. I'm curious.
There's so many. I mean, that's how you learn. You make mistakes. That's ultimately how you get things across and you progress and you develop. In terms of one thing specific, one thing I did forget to do a lot of when I first got started was get the audience really to understand me and share my story, my shortcomings, my insecurities. Because ultimately, when you stand up and speak, one of the big questions the audience have is, who are you? So you have to become good at telling your story so that you can get that sort of buy-in, that connection with the audience. Because if the audience don't trust you, if they don't believe you're credible because they haven't heard your story, no matter what you say next, it's going to be hard for them to action that, right? To fully get behind that. But once I learn about Laurie and how her first presentation, went like this, I can begin to see myself a little bit in Laurie's story, right? I can relate to you and I warm to you. And then as a result, whatever you tell me next, I'm going to be more open to. So that was something which I avoided a lot at the start, probably my own insecurities, not wanting to share, which I certainly try to include more of now.
Ah, cool. Is the story that you told in the beginning the story how you would introduce yourself, or is it also a story that is adaptable to the circumstances of the audience or the situation?
Yeah, it depends who I'm speaking to, right? And this is a key thing as well. Who is your audience? Because that's going to determine the personal story you tell. If I'm speaking to school kids or younger adults, I'm going to tell a different story about how I struggled to speak in school, about how when I was in a football team and sitting in a school changing room, and one of my teammates turned to me and said, "Kyle, do you even speak?" Because I was so quiet, right? So I'm going to pick the story which is going to relate most to the audience I'm speaking to. If I'm talking to corporates, then I'll tell more of the one you heard, for example. So it's all about connecting with the audience and figuring out what are they going to relate to? What is going to really have an impact on them?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Like I've seen so many people who are so focused on their content and they really want to write a script of the talk they're gonna give and are so busy with okay, what word sounds smarter or sounds cooler or that I can emphasize my point better. And in reality, it's not so much about the script, it's more about the connection that you make with the people in front of you. And that's so adaptable, even like the time of the day, the mood that you're in
Yeah, yeah.
yourself or the mood that everybody else is. Are you before lunch, after lunch, during lunch? Like it's so adaptable. So I like the fact that you are also conscious about, you know, it's not about a specific script, it's more about a story that is adaptable and fits the need of the audience, of the
Yeah.
relatability of the audience.
It's about
Awesome.
the audience. Yeah, that's the key point there, 100%. And you're right. And there's so many factors that can determine what you go with, but having that flexibility is something that comes over time, we should say. To begin with, you might not be comfortable dipping and diving into different parts of your life. Maybe you start with one part, really refine that, get that good, get that comfortable, and then begin to bring in other areas. But it's all a process. This is what this all
It
is, a
is.
journey.
It is. And it sounds sometimes a bit like, but the journey is what counts, right? Like it's cool to be perfect in the moment, but in reality what I found out that people want more is that you just be yourself, talk from your heart. It will be different every way anytime and you will adapt every time, but basically the process is the point that you on some point want to reach. So
Yeah, yeah,
awesome.
we would be remiss if we didn't do the old quote of "It's not about the destination, it's about the journey." So there it's
Exactly.
there. We can move on.
We can take it off. Perfect. Cool. And you are standing on stage for yourself. You just told us, even 600 people.
Hmm,
But you're also helping others. And I'm very
yes.
curious, is there like an aha moment that you had because you were working with other people that, maybe people perceived your information in a different way that you thought before? Was like one big aha moment for you that you were willing to share?
Yeah, it was actually that presentation that I mentioned. I was 20 years old, and or maybe I was 22. I think it was 22, sorry. And I was speaking to those 600 students. The reason they asked me to do it because I was a student at the time, and they wanted to show the 600 students that someone their age could do this, so that they could do it. That was the idea of the university. And what really gave me the idea was, number one, I really enjoyed doing it after, like the feeling during, etc. But then number two, I printed about 600 like A4 feedback forms for the audience to fill out. Say, what would you rate this out of 10? What did you enjoy? What could be improved? And I put them out everywhere, and about probably, I would say, 80 of them got filled out. But the feedback was really positive, Laurie. Really encouraging. They said, this has helped me feel more confident. Hadn't thought about this before. Obviously, there was improvements as well. But it was really that which gave me the fuel, the encouragement to pursue this more and begin to realize that I could make a difference for people. People my own age, but older as well. And that's what kind of gave me the jet fuel to get going.
Oh, wow. Wow, it's interesting. I like that sometimes the perspective of someone else, how they see us, can
Yeah.
really be an added value for yourself because maybe you didn't see that yourself before.
Yeah, uh-huh. Well, I just didn't know, right? It was the first time I'd ever done it, so I had no reference point to whether this was useful information or not. I was just giving it and seeing how they took it ultimately. So yeah, sometimes it can be useful to take in the opinions of others, but also it really depends what the other person's saying, right? If people are saying negative things, you don't want to make that your reality. So you have to be careful, of course, with that.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. And I think like to ask feedback in general is a really good situation. Also, what I try to say to clients also sometimes is record yourself. Because
Mm.
sometimes in your mind you're this person, and then when you see it back, it's like, oh wow. For me
Yes.
personally, it was like a very big aha moment was when I listened to myself talking, and I try to be very aware of the
Yeah.
pace I use. And I'm visual person. I like quick things. You need to engage with me. So when I talk and I'm enthusiastic, I talk quite fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in my mind, it's very reasonable. It's very easy to listen to. It's actually quite engaging and funny. And then when
Yeah.
I look at myself, I'm just like going through it in 10 minutes while I could have taken like 30. And also
Yeah.
feedback that I got from others was like, okay, you have interesting information, but I cannot process. So sometimes like,
Zooming by.
yeah, yeah, sometimes like the feedback from others,
Yeah.
together with, the visual that you recorded yourself and look back to, it can be very helpful to get to points that you're not aware of yet. So now I try to be more aware of the pace I
Mm.
use with my voice.
Yes.
Sometimes just take a break, let a
Yeah.
pause sink in, because that's actually sometimes very even more impactful than talking.
Yes, yes,
Um,
100%. Fully agree. And you're absolutely right. Feedback is critical. Recording yourself is a wonderful thing to do. People say, oh, I don't like the sound of my voice. I don't like how I look. No one does to begin with. You've just got to sort of plow through that horrible thing as well. But it really does help, is helpful because it shows you how you're coming across from the audience's perspective. That's
yeah.
the critical point there. So yeah, do it. You'll notice things you don't like, but it'll also show you the path to improving as well.
Yeah, great one. And I like how you say nobody does, because a lot of people sometimes think when other people are doing it, they don't have these doubts. They
Yeah.
don't have these thoughts. Well, in reality, everybody has them.
Yeah, we're not all
uh,
so different. We're not all so different, that's for sure.
exactly. Exactly. Really cool. And one thing that just popped into my mind is like when we think about what some thoughts can be in people's
Mm,
mind when they think about public speaking. One thought I that I get regularly is I want to become better public speaker, but I
yeah.
don't have the public speaking opportunities. If
Mm.
you have that question, if you got that question right now, like how would you answer?
Well, there's lots of places that you can find opportunities to speak. I mean, you've got organizations like Toastmasters, the Rotary Club, which are global around the world, where you can literally go and practice your presentations and speak off the cuff. So they are there. And you've also got your networking events. If you're a small business owner, you should be putting your hand up for speaking opportunities. You should be reaching out to organizers and saying, hey, can I get a 10-minute speaking slot to promote my business and share some value with your network? So these little things can help a lot at the same time. And that's really where I built my foundation in speaking, those sort of clubs, the networking events. And another thing you can do if you're quite bold is you can create your own events. You can literally set up your own event on Eventbrite, attract your own audience to come and see you, and practice speaking. You might not get a lot of people to begin with. My first workshops had about 4.5 people there, half because someone left after 10 minutes. But you get started. It's a starting point, right? And you continue on there, and before you know it, you will be getting in front of the bigger crowds.
Good one. Good one. I like your half. Like it's so relatable. You're so enthusiastic yourself and you want to help a lot of people. You want to impact lives, and then other people still have to find you too. And maybe even realize that they need it, because again, like what I found a lot is that public speaking has the association of standing in front of an audience and
Mm-hmm.
talking about your business. But basically when you're in a supermarket or in a new place or in a birthday party and people ask you what do, that's a speaking opportunity. I think it's like that simple. You can,
Yeah.
it's like everywhere around you. If you really want to have a speaker's gig, walk on the street and talk to the person who is like walking the dog and
That's
practice
true.
your
Yeah.
stories. Yeah, love
Uh-huh.
it.
Uh-huh.
Cool.
Uh-huh. Absolutely.
Um, I've been asking you a lot of questions, but I rather have this to be a conversation instead of
Yeah.
like a interview, because that sounds so formal and we're both learning. We're all learning, also the listeners
Uh-huh.
to this
Yeah.
conversation. Is there
I'll give
anything
you
you're
some
curious?
questions then. So what would you say is the biggest reason people don't try and pursue public speaking in the first place?
Ah, wow, really beautiful question. I think why people don't want to or like are scared of public speaking is because the association of other people looking at you. It's like I think you know too. Public speaking is like the biggest fear of human beings. For some people, or research shows that it's even bigger than death, which sounds insane. There's like even this super cool analogy. It's like you can rather do the I'm not sure how you say the word, the geology
Eulogy. Eulogy.
eulogy. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not a native speaker in English. A eulogy than being in the casket,
Yeah.
which is insane if you think about it, because it's only about the verbal communication that we have with human beings that we already have on the street. But the fact that you stand somewhere and people look at you, and the thoughts you have of other people thinking about you creates like a certain feeling that a lot of people don't dare to raise their hand when they have these
Yeah.
speaking opportunities. And
Hmm.
I found this very fascinating theory. I'm not sure what book it was, but I read it and it just made a lot of sense. It's called the 18-40-60 rule. I don't know if you're
Okay.
familiar with it. It's like
No, yeah.
when people are 18, the biggest thoughts they have, and of course this is a structure that's like very black and white, but it will make sense in the end. When people are 18, the biggest focus is, what would people think about me? I hope they like me. I hope my hair is good. I hope it all makes sense. And they're very
Yeah.
focused on themselves.
Uh-huh.
Then when people turn older and they become more wiser, so to say, and they are around 40, the biggest focus that people have is, I don't care what people think about me. I will do what I want and I don't care about other people's opinions. And then
Sure.
when you get older and you get more grow up around 60, then people find out that it wasn't even that other people weren't thinking of them at all. So it's very interesting. And I sometimes say, like, get into that 60 mindset, because in reality, what a lot of people are thinking about when they listen to you is not if your hair looks cool, yes or no, if your clothes are beautiful ironed or a perfect color with your eyes or whatever. It's more about, what can I gain from it? So I think,
Yeah.
to answer your question, I think the biggest fear is like, what would people think of me? What would they think, that I am smart enough? Is it valuable to share? Am I cool to do this? Am I skilled enough to do this? Well, in reality, and that's like a bit of the solution, is that people don't care about you. They care about what you share. And you know
Yeah.
what to share because you worked on this project, or this is who you are. You know what to say. So
Yes.
intuitively, if you just be yourself and don't think about what other people can think, but more about like what people can gain from the information you're telling them, that's
Mm.
where this fear will, go down, or not be suppressed, but when you can turn this fear into excitement,
Mhm.
and you know that a failure is actually a learning curve, and then you start to understand that you never have to be perfect, but you just have to do it, because of practice you build confidence. I think that's
Yeah.
where the fear of public speaking can just, magically
Yeah.
at some point fly away.
Yeah, it certainly is at the forefront of people's minds, isn't it? How they're being perceived by others, the opinions of others when they're presenting it. It's understandable. I think the other factor to it as well is exposure. I mean, it was very interesting what you said actually about how in the Netherlands you did public speaking every year in school. Is that correct?
It's correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
That's
part of
really
the system.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that because we don't have that here at all. In fact, the first time you'll have to be asked to do a presentation is probably when you're in work, when you're about 24.
Wow.
Yeah, so you've got all of that time, and then you're all of a sudden given 60 slides, and you have to go and present. So there's been no training beforehand. Been no nice way into this. So I feel like the lack of exposure, the lack of experience, is also something which perpetuates this fear which is in society. long term. So I think things need to be done a little bit more in advance as well, and give people the correct tools at the same
Yeah.
time, because there's a lot of, it's hard to do public speaking well. You know, maybe teachers are not doing it in the best way possible for their students, for example. So there's a lot of different things that come into it, but nonetheless, everyone can get past the fear if they're willing to invest time and face it and get out of their own head and adopt that 60 mindset.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, yeah. It's cool what you say. Like everybody can learn it once you're willing to put the time and effort in it. Once
Yeah,
you really feel that this is a skill that you want to adapt and you are willing to, smash through those fears, then everybody can learn it because it's a skill we're born with. It's not something that is not there. It's already in you. You just have to find it and,
yeah.
practice it again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So kind of moving past the fear, then let's say someone gets a little bit more comfortable, they begin to enjoy their speaking. What are some of the key mistakes you see people make who are perhaps they don't have the fear, but they're just not quite, I don't know, getting the message across in whatever way they want to? What are some of the mistakes you see at that stage, Laurie?
Yeah, good question. I see a lot of similarities with the 5 pillars you just
Hmm.
mentioned. I also have 5 pillars. It's a different one. I structure it as a pyramid, and we always start with the mindset, which is basically the fear, because I really believe that if you feel uncomfortable, that your story can be so great, but it just doesn't come across because people feel that you're not feeling it.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the biggest things I think for people is the structure. I don't actually remember what was your name for it.
Yeah, structure was number three. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mine is actually also number 3. Like there's a bit of a baseline in the beginning, but in some point you have to structure your thought, your talk, and not in a way, because that is the point that I want to make. Not in a way that it's completely planned and practiced in every single word, because it's very important to be structured, but at the same time, it's also very important to be authentic and real. And I think the
Mm,
combination of the two, that's where I see the most mistakes. Like sometimes the talk is perfectly structured and technically it's absolutely magnificent,
yeah,
outstanding. But in a way, you just don't believe it, or you don't feel it, or you're bored after 2 minutes. And on the other hand, you have the authentic speaker speaking from the heart, improvising on stage, and sometimes it's spot on, but sometimes it just lacks structure because they didn't practice.
yeah, yeah,
And then the magic happens when you combine the two. If you can authentically improvise with confidence in a structured way, and that is, I think, what practice is all about. But the
yeah,
mistakes I see is like on that spectrum. Like you want to be somewhere in the middle, you want to gain into in that gray area, but there's then the black and the white that feels for some people very comfortable. Like very comfortable for some people can be practice it all over again, like what I did with you know the paper. I practiced it so many times and I still read it because I felt uncomfortable.
yeah.
And then
Hmm.
I personally went a bit to the other side of the spectrum. I was like, now it needs to become more for me, and I was improvising. And sometimes I was standing in front of a group and I was like, I don't even understand what I'm saying myself. It doesn't make sense. People felt the enthusiasm, but they were completely lost
Yeah,
in the content.
yeah,
So the
yeah,
magic happens in
yeah.
between, I believe.
I agree. You do need that unity, and I guess it's a little bit like, for example, a footballer, right? A footballer will practice his or her skills, shooting, defending, dribbling, but in a game they've got to adapt to the different things coming their way, how the ball's approaching them, if someone's behind them. So they've got to be versatile, and it's kind of the same thing. You want to showcase the skills, but in a versatile, flexible way at the same time. So this is a good one then, kind of based on that. What is your opinion on scripts? Do you think scripts should be thrown away altogether? Or do you think there is a place for having word by word scripts for your presentations?
Yeah, good question. Because I basically, uh, like in my last answer, I said it's not cool at all. But in reality, and that is, I think, what public speaking is all about. Like you can have 5 pillars, you can have a perfect pyramid structure, how I call it, or a hero's journey, how other people call it, and you know, do it all perfectly. But in reality, every human being works different. So every human being resonates with another person or works in a different way. Just like what you said, you're dyslexic, you like to gain information, so you choose to listen to it instead of reading it. And that's
Yeah.
the same with using scripts. For me personally, it really doesn't work. It gives
Hmm.
me the pressure that I have to remember a lot of things, and that's not
Yeah.
where my strength is. My strength is more, and that's what I use. I use bullet points, so I remember parts of the structure that I can go back to. But when I do a specific talk over and over again, it will be different all the time.
Yeah.
But for some
Uh-huh.
people, the idea of not having the script in front of you is so scary, and it
Yeah.
really distracts them from their content, and it really helps them to feel comfortable and confident. Then I think it's absolutely a really cool tool to use. But that's all what it is. It's a tool. It's not
Hmm.
your baseline. It should not be the the holy grail of your presentation because you wrote this perfect script. I think it's more a tool that can be helpful for a specific person that needs it to feel comfortable. So it's
Hmm.
not that like one thing is good and the other thing is bad. I think it's more about like what fits a person. How can one person be as comfortable and authentic while doing a presentation or a conversation? And if a script really works, then use the script. But, and I think this is very important because again, there's a line between content and authenticity, or like, improvisation, is sometimes go take that step out of your comfort zone to try to do it differently and see if it works. Because if you try just one time, like, could you walk within one time of practice? No, you had to fall and stand up. So
Yeah.
that's the same with, I think, with using a script. Like, I know some people that use it and it really works for them, and I know some clients that used it in the beginning and they also tried to do something differently, and it gave, a different perspective. So I think it,
Yeah.
it could be. What do you think?
I think yes, it's about the individual and what works for them. I think also it's about the presentation you're doing. So, for example, if you're doing a very long presentation, over 10 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, whatever it may be, if you did a word for word script for that, you're just going to give yourself a sore head. It's not going to work, right? But if you are doing a presentation which is very much time bound, where you've got a limited period of time to say what you want to say, get across exactly what you want to cross, say a 1 minute elevator pitch, or a 3 minute quick video or something like this, or a competition speech where you've got limited time and you need to get things across in a correct way because you're getting marked or whatever. Sometimes then a word for word script can be useful because you're ensuring you're getting all of the key information in there. But then the challenge is you've got to internalize that script so that when you say it, it doesn't feel like a script. That's
Good
what you've
one.
got to try and do there. And that takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of recording yourself as well, seeing how it's coming across. And it takes a lot of referring back to who you are as an individual and ensuring that the real you is coming across, even though these words are pre planned, which is the challenging bit.
Yeah, yeah, I love that actually. Like the extra part to this question, because I also read in a book, it's like it's not about like um because the thing about practice sometimes that I get from people is that if I practice too much, it sounds scripted. But in
Yeah.
reality, if you sound scripted, you did not practice enough because you
Mm,
want to be above the content and practice it so much that it's ingrained in your body, and then you can actually quite improvise scriptedly, if that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah.
So
There should be
yeah,
no thinking. There should be no thinking, right? That's where you
exactly.
want to be. It's just doing. That's the
Yeah,
point you want to get to.
yeah,
Absolutely.
love it, love it. Cool, Cal. I'm looking also at the time, and I want the people that are listening to this to pop this interview up whenever they can and don't have to schedule it in your agenda. So I want to finish with this last question. We had, in my opinion, very cool conversation about the topic. Is there anything you want to elaborate on, or one last thought that you still want to share with the people listening?
I would just reiterate that we're talking about public speaking here, but it's not actually about public speaking. It's actually about confidence, the confidence to speak anywhere, anytime, any place. Because the reality is, if you can learn how to speak with confidence in front of 100 people, that interview you've got coming up, that networking event, that party you've got coming up will seem a lot less daunting because you already know you have the inner ability to speak to a crowd, so you can speak to anyone at any time in any place. That's what I would say.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. And I think this is also, like a nice rounded conversation, because that is what it is. It's not about you standing on stage and entertaining a million people at the same time and making the jokes that are actually funny. It's about being comfortable and confident, being your authentic self, talking in front of people, one, two, three, many, it doesn't matter. It's just about you and the conversation that you have. Love it.
100%.
Thank
100%. I think that's
you.
a good ending point.
Haha, I knew it. I knew you were going to the end because you are committed to learn more about public speaking, to get better results and have more impact. Make sure you like this video so you can always find it back. Subscribe to the channel so you get a notification when a new one comes out. And if you want to share this link with someone else you think who could benefit from it, then do it, because we want to spread more impact. Go for it and see you on another one.